Hi there, my name is Tamar. I'm from Crackpots here in Longmont, Colorado, and I'm excited to show you this project we are calling PJ Plaid. We have all different kinds of plaids and I'm going to be walking you through how to create a mug just like this with a fun saying and a beautiful plaid that will make a mug that is hopefully going to be super, just help you stay home and be cozy this winter with your favorite drink, whatever that might be. Everyone's plaid is going to turn out different if they'd like it to. With just 4 colors and 2 brushes, there are infinite possibilities to how your plaid's going to look. It is actually a very simple project, but let me tell you, it helps to have it broken down step by step. So let's get started. Let's make sure you have all your supplies. You should have a mug. I'm going to be doing this style, but your mug might look a little different, or even whatever piece you're doing, but the same concept will apply. You should have 4 colors. We gave you black, a darker green, a red, and a lighter green. And you're gonna get to use those however you want. You should have a thicker square brush and a skinnier liner brush, a toothbrush, which we'll use towards the end, a napkin, and fill your cup of water with just a little bit. We have this sticker that is kind of in replacement. It was the best way to send it in a to-go kit. This sticker is what we're gonna be taping off with. And if you have masking tape or blue tape at home, that will work just as well. So you're welcome to have that. Then you should also have a piece of pink paper, which we call the magic paper, and I'll show you how to use that later. And it's nice to have a pair of scissors on hand and also a ballpoint pen on hand. Having all of that, we're good to get started. I'll show you a very basic plaid, and then you can keep it very simple or you can get fancy with it, and I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to start by first pointing out that plaid obviously has vertical stripes and horizontal stripes. And that's the main thing that you want to do throughout your project. Start vertical and mimic that horizontal, and then vertical and horizontal. And let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to demonstrate with red. You can choose any color as your most dominant color. Like for instance, this one used a dark green as the most dominant color. This mug right here used the light green as the most dominant color. This one right here used the black as the most dominant color. And you can use red and so on. And so the way we're gonna start is you start with your thickest brush, and you're gonna start with your thick lines first. And we're doing this on a flat surface, but then I'll translate it to the mug in just a moment. Let me just show you basically how this goes. First, you're going to press and pull and get a nice straight line. Now the pottery will receive the paint differently, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So you're going to want to make all your vertical stripes. You might have to dip back in your paint. You're going to make all your vertical stripes. I'll just make 3. You're going to let this dry on paper. This doesn't dry very well. But do you see how I spaced them out nice and evenly? Now, whatever I do this vertical way, I should mimic and do again horizontally. So I'll dip back in my paint, and I'm going to press, same pressure, and I get a similar thickness of line. I like to reload my brush very frequently so that I always have enough paint. If your paintbrush is making kind of like a scratchy noise, that means you need to reload it with more paint. So I find myself reloading very often. So you see the distance between these 2 lines is similar than the distance between those 2 lines. And so that's the start of our red-based plaid. I'm gonna clean my brush off and then come over here and use my liner brush. Then I can pick a second color. And what I usually do is I'll dip into my next color and I will go in between the 2 lines. So in between every red line, I'm going to start with my vertical, I'm going to put a green line. And I will work my way all the way around with green lines, and I'll just assume that this would be continuing on, but I'll just go on either end here. So then I have these green lines in between every line, every red line. So green, red, green, red. Once I get all my vertical and I complete my vertical, I'll go horizontal. And I will go in the same spot in between the two reds, and I'm going to go across. And across, right in between the two reds. And I start to create a pattern. And I'll clean out my brush. Now this right here is already a plaid. It's already a beautiful plaid. So you could stop there if you wanted to. I usually save black till the end. However, you saw that I did have a black based plaid, so you don't have to wait till the end for black, but I typically do. The next step would be I'm gonna go do this as my last one. I'm going to go right down the center of my red line. So I can start here, and I'll go right down the center of my black line, or my red line, sorry. I'm gonna put a black line all the way down the center of my red line. And again, all the verticals. And I slowly am creating a complex plaid. So if you wanted to, you don't necessarily have to go across and back on every single color. You could leave it like this. At any point, you can always decide that you like your plaid, or you can keep going. So now I'm doing my horizontal, and I'm doing it right in the center of the red line. And there I have this plaid. At this point, you can be done again, but you can always add more. Like for instance, if you wanted to take the green and put a light green line on either side of the green, the dark green, you could go on and on and on and keep adding colors. And the plaid just keeps on getting more and more complex. But this is a very basic plaid. And you'll see that this one is red, but you'll see that this one uses the exact same concept. We started with the dark green, and we did our vertical and horizontal, and then in between we did red, and then on top of the line we did black. So this and this are done exactly the same way. Likewise, we started with black here, the line that went in between was green, and the line that went on top was red. You have to do one color at a time, vertical, then horizontal. And I'll show you this one too, just to demonstrate. This started out with the light green as the dominant first thick stroke, and then red went in between, and then black went on top. So all of those were made exactly in the same way. Just if you wanted to take it up a notch, just to let you know, like for instance, this one, we got fancy. And what you'll notice is that we alternated the very first line. We went red, green, red, green. But again, it's the exact same concept. We alternated the red and the green as our first step, but the light green went in between and the black went on top. And it was done vertical and then horizontal. This one's another one getting a little fancier, but we just started one step at a time. The base was red, then we did the light green in between, then we did the dark green in between, and then we got fancy and did black on either side of the green, and that made it even more complex. I hope you see that it's very simple. However, you can take it, as long as you keep step by step and do the exact same thing over and over and stick with your step vertical, then horizontal, you'll create a beautiful plaid of your own. So let's get started with our mug. The first thing you're going to want to do is tape off where the plaid is going to end. It's so nice because your plaid is going to have kind of a rustic look, so it's really nice to give it a nice sharp edge with the tape. And so we gave you a piece of sticker, which is kind of like the tape. If you have masking tape, it might be a little easier at home, but this should be just fine as well. So I'm gonna make sure you have enough of this to go all the way around. And you're simply going to pick where you want your plaid to stop. So I usually kind of start under the handle. That's a good starting point so that if your tape, you know where your tape begins and ends. And then you're just going to wrap it around. I'm gonna open that up. You're gonna wrap it around. And make it meet back at the front. Now this is one of those reasons that you could rip it off, but I'm going to just give it a little snip with my scissors. There we go. And that looks pretty straight. You're gonna make sure you press it down really nicely and make sure it's really well stuck down. The tape is just gonna make it so much easier for us to paint more freely. Now what you're going to see is that this, from this bottom of the tape down, is going to be your plaid, and then once we take the tape off, you'll have the rest of the mug to do your writing, and that will be our last step. One more thing that we need to do to prepare our mug is to use a pencil. Now we want to be able to space our lines nicely and not really have to think about it. I like to not have to think about these things. So I usually don't, it's kind of tricky to put a stripe right under the handle. So I'll offset it a little bit to the side and I will make an X right through the middle of the mug. So try to center it right in the middle. And then I'll go again. I'll make it right in between these two lines. I'm gonna go kind of like cutting a pie, evenly cutting a pie. You're gonna make really gently. Now pencil marks will burn away and disappear. You don't wanna press too hard, and I often will even smear it out. It's the better it is with less residue on your piece, it'll fire away even better, but try not to press too hard. But this kind of gives you an even spacing of your lines. So what I like to do when I'm doing the plaid is I'll kind of carry it around the corner just so I can see where each line needs to be. Come around and come around and there. And now I don't have to worry about spacing perfectly because I've pretty much already got it planned. Okay, so let's start with our plaid. You may have it all figured out. I don't. I'm going to just start and just see where my colors take me. I think I will begin with red. I'm in a red kind of plaid mood. So again, when you get ready to paint, make sure your brush has a little bit of moisture, but dry it off on your paper towel. And then you're going to start at your first tick mark. I like to have my brush nice and loaded. And here's my first tick mark, and I'm probably gonna go off to the right, just right straight down through it. Paint it, okay? And then I'm gonna work my way around. I start right on the tape. Notice that I start right on the tape and I paint down. And again, I'm gonna start right on the tape and pull down. Now my spacing is like, I try to give the same amount of pressure on my brush each time I paint. And even though my tick marks are there, I keep track of how my spacing is, but I start right on the blue and pull down. I start right on the blue and pull down. Now your mug might be a slightly different shape. You might have more room or less room to do it. You might have more of a rounded look. Just pull straight down like that and you'll work your way all the way around the mug. Don't worry about being too perfect. It's supposed to be a cozy, charming plaid. Now I only do one coat because I tend to like to be able to see the translucency of the color. Like for instance, I don't know if you can see that the green on here, it's a little bit lighter where it doesn't overlap. So I tend to go so it gets darker where it overlaps, just like it would in real plaid. So I tend to just do one coat, but you can go back and do a second coat, but then you have to do it both ways. Do your second coat before you do your horizontal. Okay? Sometimes I'll also use it as an opportunity to start from the bottom and go this way so that it evens things out. But as the design gets more and more complex, the less you'll see any tiny little imperfections. So once your first stripe is done, your vertical stripes are done, you're gonna wanna decide and kind of think through how many of these thick stripes around we're gonna have to do. I'm probably gonna be able to fit 2 of them on this. And maybe even I'll go all the way up to the blue and I'll carry it all the way around on the blue. So I'd like to start under the handle so I know where to begin. And I do tend to hold my mug just like this and I'll pull towards myself. So I'm gonna use the same pressure that I used before and I'm just gonna go, and I know I'm not gonna make it all the way around, so I'm gonna stop on top of one of my vertical lines. And then I can start again on one of my vertical lines and get pretty far, but stop on your verticals so that you can kind of have a good stopping and starting point. And maybe you get to know that you can only get 2 stripes down before you have to refill your brush. But try to use the same pressure that you used on the first round. I'm going to turn my mug around because it's hard to get under that handle sometimes. But then I stopped like that. So I worked my way all the way around. Now be careful not to get your fingers into the paint. Sometimes it's good to put your hand in there and then you can turn it as you go like that. That's helpful too for kids to be able to hold a mug like that. Then we're going to space the next one just about the same, and we're going to work our way all the way around with the same pressure, and that's about as far as I'm going to get. I'll start again. And then I'll start again here. And I love when it has a little bit of a wiggle and a waggle to it because it's fabric, right? If it were your pajama bottoms, PJ Plaid, if it were your pajamas, they'd be all wrinkly too, right? So that is step number 1. You've got a beautiful basic plaid. And actually, you could be done at this point if you've liked this plaid just the way it is like this. But we're going to continue on. So we're going to let this first coat dry a little bit. Now you can pause if you're ever going slower than I am or need to take your time or just want to chat with whoever you're painting with. Pause this and catch up and take your time and enjoy the process. I'm going to go ahead and start with my next color. I'm going to do the dark green next. And I am going to stick with our plan and I'm going to go in between the 2 thick lines with kind of a thinner line. I'm going to show you this though. With a liner brush, there's two ways you can use it. If you tickle the piece really lightly, you can get a nice thin line. And some people can do it even really light and get a really skinny line. If you press harder, you're going to get a much thicker line. So you can decide with your pressure what kind of line you're going to get. Oops, I put too much. So whenever you're painting, again, you're going to want to make sure you have a little bit of water in your brush, but not too much. You want to dry it off and then put a little bit of water on it. And you want to, here, let me do that one more time. You're going to clean your brush off, dry it off, and then go get your paint. And you want to have plenty of paint on your brush, but you're going to be refilling very frequently. So I get paint on my brush. I start on the blue and I'm going to do my verticals in between the 2 lines, in the white space between the 2 thick lines. And I'm going to turn my mug and make my way all the way around. And even sometimes you have to refill while you're doing that. But turn your mug and start on the blue so that you get that nice crisp sharp line. and work your way all the way around. Now I like to almost drop my paint onto the piece so that it's a good thick coat and I don't have to do more than one coat or anything like that. You certainly are welcome to do more than one coat. I don't tend to do that on this kind of piece, but that certainly is up to you. And then here's our handle where you have to be kind of tricky and reach in there and get that. And from here, we're going to start under the handle and get our line in between the two, in the white space between the two red lines, going horizontally. Now again, you don't want to get your fingers in there, so I'm going to just be super careful. You might want to pause and wait a minute for it to dry. It does dry super fast, but you can be, see when it gets to be this little dry brush, that's when I know I need to refill my brush. And I don't like when it has that, so when I go back to my line, I start a little bit back in there and I continue on. I start a little bit in there and then I continue on. You can also get a little bit of water in your paint, and sometimes I'll just kind of mix in a little tiny bit of water on the lid. I don't have a lid right here, but on the lid I'll mix it just to make the paint just a little more inky, an inky consistency, and that helps too. Now, if there was another red line right here, I think the center would be right pretty much on the bottom of this mug. So that kind of makes it easy. This last brush, this last line, I'm just gonna run it along the bottom of the mug because that would be where it would be centered between the two lines. And I'm going to turn my mug, make my way all the way around. Starting to look like plaid. And there we go. Clean off my brush, dry it off. You can see there's a little bit of green in there, so I'm gonna swish it around again, dry it off, and go to the next. So now we have two colors. We can go ahead and add a third. I think I will go ahead and go with my black now. I'm gonna dip into the black, and now my next step is to go on top of the red. Now again, if at any point I feel like this is a really pretty plaid that could be finished, but I think I'm gonna do a black stroke right down the center of the thick red. Right down the center. And go all the way around. And that will make it, take it to the next level of complexity, which is kind of fun. And I feel like when you get to the third color, it's enough of a plaid that if you don't want to do the horizontal part, you don't have to, because I feel like the stitching in real plaid sometimes doesn't go any further than this. But as you can see, the next step would be to do the black on the horizontal on top of the red. Now, another thing that you could do, I'm gonna leave this like this, but I'm gonna show you that if you wanted to get even fancier, you can keep adding. Now, I like this just the way it is, but just for demonstration purposes, I can put a line on either side, like light green on either side of the dark green. And that gets a whole different look. And it kind of fills in that space. And I'm doing all the vertical. And work my way around. So at any point that you wanted to stop with your design is perfectly fine. You just, whatever you do, you just want to make sure you do all your vertical and be consistent about where it ended up. Like if it's in between the red or wherever your lines end up, you want to be consistent all the way around so that it truly creates a plaid pattern. Now the light green, sometimes I will go over it twice, especially if it's part of the, on top of other colors, just because it is a much more subtle color. But that is the plaid. And I could stop like that. I think I am gonna, just to show you, I'm going to go ahead and do the horizontal black and show you how that will. Now normally I would go black, red, and I would do vertical and then horizontal, vertical then horizontal. And so this is just how it was on top of the red line. I'm going back on top of the red line. So this ended up being quite a complex pattern because I wanted to demonstrate how easy it can be to keep adding and adding however you want. And you can see that I'm not trying to be perfect, and in the end it ends up being really cute. Love it. Okay, so now we have our plaid on the bottom, and you can let it dry, but I am going to be impatient as usual. And I'm going to pull up the tape just like so, and pull it off. And that is one of my favorite things. It's so satisfying when you have a rustic piece, but then with that sharp edge, it just makes it look so finished and beautiful. Okay, so that's our plaid. Let's move on to the next step. Once it dries, we're gonna put the words on it. Okay, so now in order to put the words on it, what we're gonna do is we're going to use our pencil and our pink paper. Now we have this amount of space for our words. Now we did a whole bunch of cup of hope, cup of happiness, and we just thought that would be a fun set to have in your house so that you could pick what mug you felt like you were in the mood for today. There's cup of peace, cup of gratitude. We even made a big old sign that says cup of booze, which is kind of silly. Cup of strength, but everybody has something else that they might want to think about in the morning. You may even decide that you want to put a name, like I could put my son's name Mason on here. That could be a fun way to go. Whatever you decide to do, instead of trying to paint that without any planning at all, the first thing you're going to do is kind of use your paper. This pink paper is your magic paper, and you're going to want to cut it to size about the amount of, let's kind of measure it from here to here is how much space we have right there. And we're going to cut it. You want to make sure you use this side up because that's the only way it's going to work. But I'm going to cut a piece, and I'm going to say I'm going to write within this amount of space. I'm going to keep this side up on this piece so I don't forget, because that will get confusing if I don't do that. But on this side up, I'm going to cut it to size so that I know that this is how much space I have to write, okay? And then I'll set this aside, and let's just say you're doing cup of love. You can write and use an eraser if you want to, if you don't like your spacing. That's kind of small. Cup of love. You want to make sure you write it big enough that you can actually trace it with a paintbrush, because that is a little trickier when you're using a paintbrush. But this way you can make sure you like the spacing of everything, and you can even stretch out your letters if you want. So once you have it on the paper the way you like, you hold it onto your piece. If you have some of the sticky left that's clean, here, I have a clean one over here. I have a little piece of sticky, or if you have tape sitting nearby, you can stick it on there so that you center it where you want it. And I'll stick it on here. Then you're going to use your ballpoint pen and press really hard. Cup, well, I have to write of, and then trace L-O-V-E. And that will transfer, I don't know if you can see that, but that transfers onto your pottery, and then you know you have a good distance between everything. That way it's so much easier to plan on a piece of paper than it is to plan on your piece, or to just start trying to erase on your piece, because eraser cannot be used on pottery because the residue that's left behind by the eraser is going to make the glaze kind of jump and resist, so it's not a good thing to do. If you're having a hard time seeing it because it's so faint, I would just say very gently with a pencil, go over it so you can see it. Now don't go too hard, but that way I think you can see it. Transferring it on is just super helpful. Now, with your liner brush, your skinny liner brush, you're going to pick what color. You don't have to use black, but I used black because it was nice and bold. You're going to once again tickle the piece. Now when you're doing letters, I would even practice on the bottom if you want, or of your mug, and practice writing your name. A lot of times I'll say made, I'll practice, and I'm going really fast, but I do one letter at a time, or one line at a time, I should say. So don't try to write in cursive. Do one, like if it's a W, that's 4 lines. And I will always like try to do something that reminds me what I was doing that day. Like for instance, if you're making this with your family, you can say Thanksgiving 2020, or you can say Mama and Malia did this together in 2020. So made with love and Tamar. Anyway, well, made with love. So anyway, I showed you one letter at a time. So do a little practicing on the bottom of your mug and you'll get a sense of it. But again, one stroke at a time. So very tip of your brush. You're going to need to dip almost every line that you do. But even a U, I usually come at it as 2 lines. 1, 2. The P is 2 lines. Cup. I go very slowly, but I go 1 line at a time with the very tip, and I'm tickling my piece. Cup of. Now with the bigger letters, you can press a little more, but I usually start thinner and not try to be too thick. If you're good at calligraphy or anything like that, you know better than anyone how to do this thick and thin lines. But don't worry too much about that. I sometimes will just do it however I feel. And again, like that is going to be 1 line. And you don't have to have good handwriting, because when you start painting on top of your letters, it's just going to work out. Same thing goes for if you're at home and you want to print something out, you could do that as well, and then you can trace it onto your piece. You don't have to go over it a second time, but a lot of times I'll just kind of do a quick run through and kind of clean up my letters just a little bit. Just take your time, and if you do one with a second coat, I would just probably go around and do all of it with a second coat, just so that your letters are all the same richness of black. Second coat is more than enough usually for it to be a nice color, deep black. And you can do both sides if you wish. You could put a name on one side. You could have it so that you turn it on some days. You'd have a cup of hope. Another day you have a cup of love. So that is writing on your mug. While I'm waiting for some of that to dry, I'll take my thick brush. Oops, I gotta clean that out. I had a little bit of red left over on that. I'll take my thick brush and I'm gonna paint my handle black. Now when painting the handle, I usually just kind of start at the base where it meets the mug and I kind of jiggle it in there real carefully. The rest of the handle I can paint more freely, but it's that where it meets the base of the mug. I like to have my brush loaded with lots of colors so I can just drop it on and I'll reach in there and then I can paint more freely on the rest of this. Same with the top. I just kind of drop it in there. And work my way around. And I'm going to do a second coat on the black so that it's a super rich color and that I don't see any brush strokes on that handle. I think having a wonky design on the plaid and having it rustic and, you know, hand done, it's sometimes nice to have it offset by a really stark black handle. Gives it a little class and a little flair, but usually you let each coat dry, and it doesn't have to be 100% dry, but you mostly don't want to overpaint an area. If you let it dry, and then you almost want to lay each layer like nail polish, so that, you know, if you want to lay it down, not globby, but shiny is important. So it goes on shiny. Okay, so now we have our handle painted. Now we gave you lots of extra color. This is all the painting I did, except I probably will write on the other side. But if you wanted to use some of the color to paint the inside of color, you're welcome to do that. But this is where we're stopping for now, and we have one more step to go. Okay, and last but not least, we're going to splatter our mug. If you see on the inside of these, all that black splatter gives it a little bit of personality, a little bit of rusticness, just a little bit of fun, and it's fun to do. Now it is messy. All of these paints are water-based, and they wash up, like they'll wipe off your table really easily, but that doesn't mean you want to get it all over the place. So I am going to suggest that you find an Amazon box or a box that you have laying around your house that you can do some splattering on top of or into. So what you're gonna do, I'm gonna find my black. I think you can see it's in a I'll put this in here so you can see. You're going to, you can clean out your water if you want, but you're gonna get your toothbrush just a little bit wet. Oops. You're going to dip it into the black, if that's the color you plan. You can splatter with green too if you want. And then you're going to use your finger to pull back and flick. And just have fun and splatter. And then turn your piece and splatter some more. Try not to get your fingers in there, but splatter away. Give it that fun look. And then I'm going to go ahead and get a little more. Now again, the bottom of your mug is a good place to practice, because different amounts of wetness get you different size splatter marks. But you can practice off to the side too and see how it's coming out. But I think I am satisfied with that. And sometimes it's hard to stop, but there you have it. My Cup of Love mug. Ta-da! Hope you enjoyed this class. I hope you see that everybody followed the same exact steps, but ended up with a mug that was uniquely their own. And I hope you enjoy lots of warm and cozy drinks out of your wonderful PJ Plaid mug. Have a crackpot day.